Welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today because we're looking at something truly fascinating. We're taking the entire historical research methodology syllabus and framing it for what it actually is: a thrilling, step-by-step toolkit for cracking the ultimate cold case, which is human history itself. I mean, think about the construction of the Great Pyramids or the sudden, mysterious collapse of the Bronze Age. Forget everything you thought you knew about dusty old libraries. Today, we're talking about high-stakes investigation.
Okay, let's dive into this. I want you to literally step into the shoes of a lead investigator. A crime happened, or a monumental event occurred, centuries or even millennia ago. There are no living witnesses. Period. But it's actually way worse than that. The scene hasn't just gone cold. It's been paved over 100 times. Cities have burned, empires have fallen, languages have completely died out, and the physical evidence has just been decaying in the dirt for thousands of years. So how do you, as the lead detective on this case, establish the absolute truth? How do you prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt, what actually went down? Well, to answer that, we kind of have to completely reframe our mindset. Historical research isn't just reading a bunch of old books and, writing a summary of what you read. Not at all. History is a rigorous social science. It's governed by strict parameters regarding its nature, its scope, and its significance. We don't just ask what happened, we ask why it happened within the specific socioeconomic parameters of that exact era. We don't just guess, we systematically uncover.
Section 1. The science of the past. Before we can even think about hunting for clues, we absolutely need to establish our scientific framework. And this brilliantly illustrates the dividing line between an amateur and a professional historian. There's general research, which is really just understanding the concept and scope of a topic, like, say, reading a biography about Julius Caesar for fun. But then there's scientific research. The historical field borrows the exact same rigorous scientific method you'd expect to see in a chemistry lab or a physics experiment. A professional doesn't just read the biography. They actively test the claims in that biography against primary data. We aren't just observing here. We are rigorously applying a method. Let's look at the basic tactical procedures of this method. First, you define your concepts. Second, you develop a theory of what you think happened. Third, you formulate a hypothesis, which is a testable prediction. And fourth, you introduce variables. Now, how on earth does a historian use a variable? Well, let's say your hypothesis is that a specific war was caused by competing religious ideologies. Your variable might be looking at the exact same event, but strictly through the lens of a different social class. Or maybe you dig through another nation's trade archives just to see if economic factors actually drove the conflict instead. You're literally forming a theory of the case and testing it with different variables, exactly like a forensic scientist. Section 2. Designing the investigation. Once we've got the science down, it's time to build the actual blueprint for our investigation. Now, what's really interesting about this is the sheer depth of preparation required. Look at this drafting process for a research proposal. You've got the statement of the problem, the objectives, a thorough review of existing literature, identifying your limitations, the significance of the study, defining specific questions, setting an analytical framework, locking in methodology, and outlining the entire organization. Why do things like a literature review or identifying limitations matter so much? Because knowing your limitations, like recognizing that a key set of ancient documents was never translated or simply didn't survive, prevents you from making false definitive claims. This massive list right here, these are your mission parameters. A master detective doesn't take a single step into the field without knowing exactly what they're looking for. So, with the proposal approved, here is the boots-on-the-ground timeline for the historian. You select the topic, you review the literature to see what other investigators have already uncovered, you plan your data collection, you take meticulous notes, you organize that material logically, and finally, you write your cohesive first draft. But keep in mind, this is rarely a straight line. It's actually an iterative loop of discovery. Very often, taking detailed notes on a brand new piece of data is going to send you right back to the literature review, just to see if anyone else noticed what you just found. This is the structural pipeline of deep historical discovery. Section 3. Hunting for sources. The planning is done. We're now entering the most suspenseful part of the methodology, hunting for the physical evidence of our historical cold case. We need sources. So the crucial point is understanding exactly what kind of evidence you actually have in your hand. On one side, we have primary sources. This is your first-hand evidence, the eyewitness testimony. Think of a mud-stained diary written by a soldier right on the front lines of World War I.
On the other side, we have secondary sources. This is someone else's later analysis of that firsthand evidence, like a book written by a modern military historian in 2024 about that exact same battle. As an investigator, you've got to always know the difference between an actual eyewitness and someone who just read the report. And our evidence locker expands even further. Beyond primary and secondary, we've got tertiary sources. These are essentially your finding tools, like indexes or bibliographies you use to track down other documents. We have documentary or ancillary sources, like legal deeds, treaties, or tax records. We have non-documentary or auxiliary sources. These are the physical realities of the past: a rusted sword, a piece of broken pottery, a uniform, or the stone foundation of an ancient building. And finally, we have oral history, which is recorded spoken testimony passed down through generations. This is a massive, highly varied arsenal of investigative tools right at your disposal.
Section 4. Interrogating the evidence.
But here's the hard truth of any investigation. Evidence lies. People misremember things. Documents are forged. Artifacts are moved from their original locations. So we literally cannot just accept our sources at face value. We have to cross-examine them. This is called the evaluation of sources. Historians use strict analytical methods to test the validity of historical data. Think of analytical methods as the historian's lie detector test. What does that actually look like in practice? Well, it could mean performing linguistic analysis on a document to see if the vocabulary perfectly matches the alleged time period. It could be carbon dating an auxiliary artifact or cross-referencing astronomical dates mentioned in a text. We break down the material to meticulously separate the truth from the fiction.
Let's move to and see how this builds into the next phase. Once we've used those analytical methods to break the evidence down and verify what's actually true, we use synthetic operations for the organization of data. What's a synthetic operation? It's the process of synthesis. It's taking all those newly verified, isolated facts and combining them to understand the actual cause, effect, and timeline. It's weaving the isolated threads back together to form a clear, undeniable tapestry of the past. After synthesis, you've got to present your case. This brings us to academic writing. But please, do not think of these as boring formatting rules. Constructing an argument, following the Turabian Manual, which, by the way, is the absolute gold standard style guide specifically designed for historical and academic research, using proper footnotes, endnotes, and bibliography style. These are the strict courtroom procedures you absolutely must follow. You are presenting your argument to a jury of your peers, and your footnotes, those are the specific, unassailable pieces of DNA evidence you point to in order to win your case. Section 5. The battle for objectivity. We are nearing the climax of our explainer. Because look, even if you have the best research design, the best sources, and totally flawless formatting, there are ultimate challenges that can ruin an entire investigation. And the greatest of these is the battle for objectivity. This is the critical issue of remaining completely neutral and unbiased. Historians must constantly fight their own internal biases, their political leanings, and their personal viewpoints. It is incredibly easy to use a modern lens to unfairly judge a historical event, a concept known as presentism. You have to leave your modern politics at the door. You are here to impartially report the findings of the evidence, period. If you let your own worldview color the facts, you've compromised the entire investigation. And then there's plagiarism. This is the lethal trap of historical research. Stealing another researcher's work or ideas is the ultimate pitfall. But why is it so uniquely lethal in history? Because history relies entirely on a chain of trust spanning generations. If an investigator fakes or steals their findings, they don't just ruin their own career, they pollute the historical record for everyone who comes after them. In the pursuit of truth, intellectual honesty is absolutely non-negotiable. So why go through all of this? Why subject ourselves to this scientific method, the exhaustive research design, the endless source evaluation, and the immense struggle for objectivity? Because of this ultimate goal, making a verifiable contribution to the existing knowledge. When you successfully navigate this rigorous syllabus, you aren't just writing a paper. No way. You are officially adding a brand new, proven truth to the record. This is exactly how humanity's collective memory is built, one verifiable truth at a time. Which leaves us with this final thought. You now possess the toolkit. You know the methodology, the science, and the rigorous standards required to interrogate the past. So when you step out into the field to investigate your own historical cold case, what new truth will your investigation contribute to our existing knowledge? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and hey, happy hunting.